Are you scared to eat certain foods for fear of a negative reaction? Maybe you're worried about choking, having a gut response, or having an allergic reaction. This is more than just a fear of being fat or gaining weight. Welcome to the What's Eating You podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I'm a psychologist, published author, and public speaker here to educate and validate. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to today's episode on the What is Eating You podcast. I'm your host and clinical psychologist, Stephanie Giorgio. As always, these episodes are educational, so always seek professional psychological support. I hope you're doing well. I'm excited for this episode because not a lot of people speak about ARFID. ARFID, Avoidant Restrictive Feeding Intake Disorder. This is a type of eating disorder and I'm going to cover it. I actually did a video on this ages ago on my TikTok, and it was just a case study. I had no idea this would go as bananas as it did. It was just a case study, and it said this person presented to my office and they were so scared of eating peanuts. They were scared that we're going to have an allergic reaction, and because of this, they only ate potatoes for 1 year. This was actually based on a real person I've worked with. And obviously I'll be de-identifying the information and changing little bits of it so it's non-identifiable. But this video got like over 800,000 likes. That is so much. That's almost 1 million people. I have to find where the video is, but it just went ballistic and I'm not sure why. And I think it's because many people don't know about this eating disorder, but more people than we know have it. It's a really common eating disorder in the neurodivergent population, so with ADHD and ASD. And it's more than just an eating disorder on worrying about weight gain. It's more than a preoccupation of your weight, shape, and size. So I'm going to cover in this episode what is ARFID. I'll talk about a specific case study, and then I'll tell you how you can get help for it. Here we go. So not everyone I have worked with has bulimia or binge eating. There's a lot of different eating disorders out there. And one of the ones that is becoming more recognized is ARFID. ARFID, Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, also known as picky eating but extreme picky eating. It's a serious eating disorder characterized by the extreme avoidance or restriction of certain foods. It's way more than just being a picky eater. It's not driven by concerns about body weight, shape, and size, but rather an intense fear of the aversive consequences of eating, such as choking or vomiting. It typically develops in adulthood, often before age of 6, but it can come out in adulthood, especially if it's not treated or managed. So, for example, this young person in their 20s who had autism came in to see me and they'd only been eating potato chips for a year. That's it. Just a big bag of crisps, and that's all they were eating. What is the cause of this and why? What happened is they did have allergic reactions, and that's where it can usually start. Someone might have lactose intolerant, they might be celiac, they might have anaphylaxis, and then they might have a mild scare or an episode. So for this young person, she did have an allergy. I think it was to peanuts, and she had some chocolate and had a bit of a reaction to it, and she was fine. But ever since then, the fears become generalized. It's not just, I just can't eat peanuts, I can't eat chocolate. And then if I can't eat chocolate, I can't eat food from the same machine where chocolate is made. So for example, they used to enjoy frappes from McDonald's. But you know how everything says this may contain nuts on every disclaimer? She went to the extent of researching and checking and then found out that the frappes in McDonald's were made on the same machine that the chocolate frappes were made on, and chocolate may contain nuts, etc., etc. And then what happens is this person's overgeneralization of the food, which started as peanuts and then chocolate and then anything related to chocolate, then makes their food choices very minimal and marginalized to the point where they actually suffer nutritional wise. They have deficiencies. They either are underweight or they have skin issues or serious gut issues. And it's funny because they're so restrictive, but they've still got all these health problems, right? So it can be triggered by a traumatic event related to food, such as choking or vomiting, but it can also develop without such an event. Now, sometimes people with ARFID will only eat in certain ways, such as eating foods in a certain order, or they'll only eat certain colors or certain textures. And this is why it is linked to neurodiversity. So if you have ARFID, it may cause you to not want to eat, worry that something bad might happen if you eat, such as choking or throwing up or having a reaction, and you may avoid foods that don't have a certain color, taste, texture, or smell. So what is the diagnostic criteria? How do you know if you have this eating disorder? So according to the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, the criteria for ARFID includes 1. An apparent lack of interest in food or eating, or avoidance based on the sensory characteristics of food, which leads to a significant inability to meet nutritional or energy needs. So the person's not meeting their needs and they're having further issues as a result of this. The disorder is not better explained by lack of food available or by a culturally sanctioned practice. 3, the eating disturbance does not occur exclusively during the course of anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa, and there is no evidence of a disturbance in which one's body or shape or weight is experienced. And 4, it's not better explained by another mental health condition. And of course, it has to cause clinically significant distress. It has to be occurring for a significant period of time, but essentially it's very restrictive eating. Now, it can affect anyone, not just neurodivergent people, but it's really challenging. Living with ARFID limits the variety of food a person is willing to eat or consume, which can affect your mood. Imagine just eating the same thing every day, feeling so tired because you're not eating enough, not having the energy, you're probably low in iron, and this leads to nutritional deficiencies and social difficulties. They don't eat out, they avoid meals, which then can impact their social life, impact their friendships, impact everything. So when people come to me for an eating problem and we take a deep dive in their one-on-one call, there's so much more than the eating's affecting. It's their relationship. Okay, what does it mean for our relationship? Well, I really want to have children one day. Okay, so this fear of food can impact that ability. The problems are so much greater than people think. It's not just the food issue. We are solving a much bigger problem here. Treatment. How do we resolve this if you think you have it? You need support with any eating disorder. It's not something you can manage on your own unless you're happy to spend 30 years trying to figure it out yourself, which most people do. It takes time and consistent support to help you implement food exposure whilst working on your anxiety as a result. So with this young person I worked with, we developed a list of foods she used to eat, which we knew were actually safe on paper. She didn't have an allergy, but she had a psychological fear around, or she just hadn't eaten in ages. So we needed to pair anxiety strategies. And actually, I had to teach her a lot about anxiety. What are the signs? What are the symptoms? Why is it there? Because she had to not fear anxiety. So one is we change the relationship with anxiety and the distress it causes. And this is why in module 2 of Food Freedom, we look at emotion regulation. Because if you don't learn to identify anxiety and manage it when it comes up, it's going to be really hard to manage the psychological thoughts and distress, because when you're in an anxious state, your logical brain shuts down. And even though you know logically this food is safe, if you're in emotional mind, it doesn't matter. Your logical brain goes offline. So what we need to do is we need to regulate the nervous system, bring your brain back online so you're better able to access your logical thought. And once people manage their anxiety and they can recognize it and know that it's safe and okay, then we want to introduce food exposure. So we start with foods that are more safe. So for this young person, it was rice cakes. She was so anxious to even touch it on her lips. So we would just touch it with our fingers. We put it on, she touched her face with it. We saw if she got a reaction. And I really trained her on how to identify the difference. Is it an allergic reaction or is it anxiety? The difference is, if it's anxiety, using a breathing technique or a strategy will usually bring down the subjective units of distress. This is called a SUDS. Whereas if it was an allergic reaction, despite using strategies, it would get worse over time. So that's what we did. We also had emergency protocols If she was to have an allergic reaction, she knew where her EpiPen was, she knew 000. This was all online, so we had all those emergency protocols, but safe to say, in the time we're working together, never had to happen. So we started with rice cakes. We rated the anxiety she had trying them. We touched it, smelt it. I don't even think she could take a bite in our first session, but we did this over time and we did this consistently, and with my support and accountability, she got there. And safe to say, she's eating all the foods now. She's enjoyed pizza, she's enjoyed dumplings, she has enjoyed noodles, other foods from McDonald's because she only would eat one particular meal, pancakes, and a lot. So really proud of how far that person has come. The key is to gradually face and overcome your fears with certain foods, but you don't just do this by eating the foods. You need to pair it with psychological and emotional regulation strategies. So why don't people get help for this? Why did that video I made go viral and people say, oh my God, this is a disorder? Because people don't think it's a psychological disorder. They think it's a nutritional disorder. They think it's a gut issue. They think they need a naturopath. They think they need to become more restrictive with their food to reduce the anxiety that it causes. But the truth is, the more restriction, the more anxiety you will have. So whilst nutritional support can play a role, it's needed as part of a group support type of program. So when the person is undernourished, then nutritional support is definitely part of it. But essentially, we need to address psychological dysfunction. In summary, if this is you, know that it is very treatable, but it needs an intense, consistent approach. If you need help for this, feel free to book a one-on-one eating evaluation call with me. It is something we cover in Food Freedom, Fear Foods, Food Exposure, and we can have a chat about it. So the link is below. So happy to talk to you about it. But just remember, a fear of foods, even if it's got nothing to do with your weight, shape, and size, if you're worried about a gut reaction, a negative reaction, choking, anaphylaxis, and it's interfering with your life, it could be a psychological disorder such as ARFID. So get in touch and we can chat. But that is all for today. A short one, short and sweet. Please leave a review if you haven't already. And of course, I'll see you in the next episode. If you've got any requests or want to submit a story, please do it on the link below. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I am truly grateful for you being here. If you got something out of today's show, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. To access more resources or support, check out the show notes below. See you next time.